Hello and welcome to AWS Made Easy. I'm Stephen Barr.
I'm Rahul, and this is episode number
88? 88.
88.
Exciting.
Awesome. Very, very exciting. We have an absolutely packed show today, but before then, how's your 3D printing stuff going along?
Okay.
There's a lot of stuff that I've seen you print over the last few days.
Okay, we can see I've got one on the printer here that's still, let's see if I can get it. Here we go. It has the organic filaments, so it's still very, it's hard to tell what it is. It looks like something out of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. But what we've been
They're the organic supports, right?
Yes, the organic supports.
Yeah.
And so here, we've been working on busts of the various musicians. So this is Bach, and this is Beethoven under here. And so we want to build up a little collection of these. And these are the ones that I want to try and get turned into bronze using the, what is it called?
The casting technique that we spoke about.
Exactly. You take those, you dip them into ceramic, and then you heat up the ceramic, and the plastic melts out. And then you pour molten bronze where the ceramic was, and then you break away the hardened ceramic, and you've got a bronze where the 3D print was in exactly the same shape. So that's the goal. Hopefully that works.
Can't wait to see the results.
Here's the other ones I've been working on. I've been working on a little instructional video for our RDS IO1 IO2 to GP3, and so I printed out this RDS logo. But then I was doing some research.
That's awesome.
But it's really this one that's the important one. They updated the logos. And so the point I was going to make, which I thought was really, really useful, that you said, is that often you have a big prod databases, but then you have all these, these little databases floating around. And so that was the point I wanted to make with these. So we'll have a look at that video. That should come out on Monday.
Oh, that's awesome. Looking forward to it.
To make even more props for teaching. But I was thinking about with 3D printing, how there is this parallel to cost optimization. And so I started this print last night, and there's not much there. And then while I was waiting to print, I was actually cleaning up an AWS account. And I thought, okay, the things I'm doing right now are a few pennies here and there. They're not that much.
Right.
But I thought, okay, this is going to add up. Just like my print, I know it's going to add up. I know it's going to turn into something substantial, even though the little bits of it that happen at the margins, they seem like they're nothing, right? Getting rid of an elastic IP address, it seems like it's so little. But over the course of a year, over the course of thousands of accounts, wow, that's a lot of money for unused elastic IP addresses.
100% true.
Especially with the changes that are coming through, which we'll talk about later in the show.
Yep.
All right.
So what are you doing? It's been, I have been neck deep in working on RAG related stuff, and this is retrieval augmented generation, literally pushing the boundaries of a system that is nearly in production with a lot of workload coming to it, trying to figure out how to scale it, trying to figure out how to get it working without, again, breaking the bank. Because when you start running some of these systems at scale, you can really, run up massive bills. So some really interesting work going on in the field, and I'd like to, I think, discuss some of that. But yeah, the last week has been neck deep in the nuances of how to optimize a production-oriented RAG system. So would love to share some insights on that. And if others have inputs, insights, I would love to learn. There's a lot to learn, and there's a lot to do on this front.
And speaking of AI, we've got Taranjeet Singh from Embed Chain, who'll be talking to him at the end of the week. And then the following week, we'll be talking to Brian Huff, Tech Stack Playbooks. Right. So we'll have some great AI conversations coming up on our AI Fridays.
I'm really looking forward to it. Okay.
All right. Let's dive into 60 seconds of news.
Let's do that.
Oh, wait, what were you going to say?
No, I was going to say, let's dive right in. 60 seconds of news.
Awesome. Okay. All right. EC2 adds new price protection for attribute-based instance selection. The basic summary here is you can now set it as a percentage of the on-demand price. So if on-demand is $2, you can set it at 50%, so that'd be $1 for Spot. Rahul, how's this going to change people's usage of Spot?
Okay, so the biggest issue with Spot is the fact that you never know when an instance is going to be taken away from you, right? So you want to mitigate your risks by having a fleet that is spread across a large number of instance types across different availability zones and potentially regions as well. So now, unfortunately, what used to happen was that every now and then you would have a particular instance type getting launched that would just, completely blow your bill. You don't want that. And now with this attribute-based price protection, you can actually ensure that you never have that bill shock come to you again. So I would definitely rate this as a 4 and a simplifies because it just makes your life way easier.
And you can quantify that trade-off of using Spot versus on-demand in one number.
Correct.
AWS Step Functions adds integration for 33 services. Here in the article, it mentions 4. I've tried to figure out what the other 29 are.
Okay, so there is the list. If you go down to the SDK developer guide, you will actually find that there is a list. You will have to sort it by the supported date, and you look for January 18. Those are the new ones that they're supporting. However, it's really hard to figure out which regions are supported for the corresponding services. And on top of that, there are certain API for those services that are not supported on Step Functions. So if all of this sounds confusing to you, it is confusing to us too. I really wish we had a tool like the one we discussed 2 weeks ago around CloudFormation, where it tells you simply which services are available in which region along with Step Functions. So
yeah, like a Step
it could be very simpler. Exactly. So I'm going to give this a 2.5, and hopefully it simplifies. I don't know.
Hopefully. AWS Free Tier now has 750 hours of free public Elastic IP address. What does this mean? Is this a huge thing that they're offering?
What this basically translates to is you get one IP address per month free. And that translates to $3.75 approximately. So no, it doesn't make any difference. I actually think that this complexifies things and makes it harder for individuals. And this is a marketing gimmick. It just kind of screams, someone from marketing put this together. 750 hours seems like a lot, but it really translates to nothing. And if you have this false sense of security that you don't have to worry about your IPv4 addresses, then you're going to be very mistaken. You are going to get a big bill for all the IP addresses you have. It's going to cost a bomb very soon.
I guess they're trying to take away the sting of the new IP address pricing of 0.005 per hour. How many clouds?
Yeah. I'm going to give this a 1.
All right. Amazon Rekognition adds new moderation labels and improves the accuracy of content moderation for images. So this is for if you have a website or a forum that has user-submitted content and you want to make sure that people are only submitting appropriate content but can't build a human-based workflow to look at every single bits of thing, Rekognition can now tell you if it's generally safe or not. And with this update, it gets even more accurate. How is this going to affect this?
Okay, so we've been talking so much about generative AI. This is the more traditional AI, and it works really well. So if you have content that needs moderation, it's really simple to get started with Rekognition to basically give you a score and give you with confidence what's wrong with the image, if it is, and you can immediately decide to censor it or take it out as appropriate. Now, this really simplifies the life of most developers because it's a simple API call that gets the job done. So I'm going to give it a 4 clouds, and it simplifies.
I'm happy with that.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. This one is IPv6 instance bundles on Lightsail.
Was it IPv6? Okay, I should need to reach.
So it's basically trying to get you to use IPv6 only setups.
Have you tried setting up IPv6 locally?
No. Have you?
And seeing if you can connect?
No.
I don't even know how it works. Like, will our current switches handle it? Do we need an IPv6 DHCP setup?
I have no idea if any of my gear supports IPv6 at all. I'm getting close to the point where I'm like, my DHCP leases are in the low hundreds, like the low 100s.
Right.
So I need to figure that out. But I have no idea if IPv6 will support.
Like, I don't know how to get out of from my ISP out to the public internet. I just don't know how to do it. Like, Lightsail is meant to be, again, this one I'd say just complicates it. Because how does someone access a website that's put on Lightsail, like it's a WordPress website? How do you access it?
So I just tried this thing called ip6.me.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to like tell you what is your IPv6 address, and mine doesn't resolve.
Yeah, because I don't think, mine does. Mine resolved. Oh no, this page shows you IPv4.
Okay, so try ip6only.me.
It doesn't resolve.
We have a long way to go.
So I don't know how it helps with Lightsail, because everyone is setting up a WordPress or something like that. Like, I really don't know how to get started with it.
This seems like a gimmick to distract people from the IPv4 change.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's do this.
I'm trying to think of a good analogy.
I don't think you have one.
Okay.
This is basically a dog and pony show.
It's like if Lego introduced brain surgery support. Like, it's two different. All right, let's try. All right, introducing IPv6 bundles on Amazon Lightsail. This is interesting. Lightsail is tended to be seen as the simplified version, so you don't have to fully deal with all of EC2 and VPC and subnets and NAT gateways. So putting IPv6 on there, which is still a new technology for most people, it seems a little bit disjointed. Rahul, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, a typical customer of Lightsail is someone who's hosting a simple WordPress, solution or a PHP app, not someone who's, building massive applications. So for folks like that to have them start using IPv6 seems a little crazy, because I don't know how to access a website that is hosted on IPv6 today. Like, I can't even resolve my own IP address to an IPv6 because my ISP only offers IPv4. So how do you access a WordPress website using IPv6? Doesn't make sense at all. So I'm going to give this a 1 cloud and complexifies.
Yeah, agreed. Wow, so I think this is our lowest average rated review cycle we've ever done. What's happening?
Yeah,
What do you think that's the case?
I don't know. In the last 2 weeks, like when I was looking through all the announcements, I didn't find anything interesting or exciting that really got announced. And on top of that, you see all of these marketing gimmicks. It felt like somebody from marketing decided, hey, we don't have enough announcements going out. We have to hit our 1,500 or 2,500 or whatever announcements per year. And we are not hitting our weekly quota. So let's just go create some. And it felt like that in this particular instance.
I think benefit of the doubt, maybe they're really, really trying to soften this IPv4 price increase by giving out, I don't know, what looks like...
Oh, they're not giving out anything.
Well, I guess they're trying to present alternative paths, right? Well, you don't even need IPv4 anymore. Just use IPv6 with Lightsail, which is hard to understand.
Neither of these are viable alternative paths at this point, right? So if they were truly invested in providing alternatives, we'd be seeing tutorials about how to get started with IPv6. We'd be seeing tutorials about, hey, Lightsail, here's a simple example of how you can get your WordPress website available on IPv6 and still work normally for all your customers without, letting everything crash and burn.
Which wouldn't be you or me, right? I mean, we just did our own tests around ISPs, and neither of us are on IPv6 or have the capability to be there.
So from all the, from my understanding of networks and, my computer science education background, where IPv6 makes sense right now is when you have services that are talking to each other in your AWS. Okay, so that makes sense. But then again, the cost is actually on public IP addresses, not on private ones. So when will you ever have a publicly facing IP address talking to an internal service, which is also publicly facing? That just makes no sense. I would much rather have them all behind a NAT gateway and talk to each other like they're talking today. So I don't see how you're going to solve this problem immediately.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about all the, like, we're certainly not ready to go IPv6 at my house yet. I mean, I have lots of little ESP32s that I don't think have an IPv6 stack. I'm not sure. I don't think they do.
A simple thing, my gateway to the internet that's provided by the ISP, none of them support IPv6. They're all IPv4 addresses.
So, I hope we get there one day, and it'll be hard to memorize these IPv6 addresses. I like knowing all of the, I know that my NAS is dot whatever, and my camera system is another thing. I like being able to memorize that, so I'm going to stick with IPv4 as long as I can stay under.
Yeah, and the beauty is that if it's an internal network, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
You can always be behind a NAT gateway, and NAT actually postponed the problem of not having enough IP addresses by decades, in fact. So,
but at the same time, we've gotten used to this model of NAT gateways, right? The idea was that I should have been able to log into, to print to my printer from anywhere. But then we hit security concerns and say, well, do I want to print to my printer from anywhere? Because maybe lots of other people will start printing to my printer.
Yeah, exactly. But the NAT gateway really helped solve a lot of the problems that we had. And I still don't see IPv6 being mainstream anywhere. Like, you don't hear discussions about it. You don't see people, moving en masse to IPv6, and we don't even know how to deal with it. So I'm confused, honestly, at this point.
It is interesting to think of some alternative path where if IPv6 was invented 30 years ago and we never had to invent all this NAT infrastructure, but even things now like Tailscale, right, where I use that quite a bit, and that seems to have basically solved the issue that I have of wanting to have ubiquitous access to all my devices and have them appear on a virtual network, even though they're not, it is behind multiple NAT gateways.
Correct. And so I really don't see the push that AWS has working out. I mean, it's great for them. I think they'll make a ton of money. So good for them, but not great for anyone else.
Well, interesting. Well, speaking of a ton of money, you showed me this really interesting article that came out. I wanted to put this on screen. Let's put this on screen now, called "Why Going Viral Caused Us to Rip Out Everything in a Weekend."
Okay, so this is a very, very interesting article that was brought to me by one of my colleagues, Utsav. Like I said, I'm neck deep in RAG-related stuff. So let's just take a step back and talk about what RAG is, just as a refresher. We've covered it in depth in a previous episode. So a RAG is retrieval augmented generation. Now, typically, as you're aware of ChatGPT kind of environments where you ask a question, you get back a response, and it looks rich and awesome. Now, the problem is if you have your own personal information that you wanted to act as context for your queries or for your prompts, then what do? So the best way to do this is you take all of your data, you break them into chunks, and then you create what are called embeddings. Embeddings are nothing but a series of numbers that reside in a vector space, and they're stored in a vector database. Now, when you ask a question like, tell me, what I did on so-and-so date, and maybe I have my daily notes that are embedded and put it into the vector database, then the RAG system can basically look for the metadata around the date and look for all the vectors or all the embeddings that fit within a certain scope of that vector space, things that are close together. Now, the mechanism you use there is you use what are called cosine distances to decide which vectors are close together or away from each other. Now, the problem that you run into when you have tons of data that you've kind of thrown in and just done random embedding is that you'll find that the vector distance doesn't really correspond to relevance to a certain search query, right? The generic embedding just doesn't work all the time. And I think there's a graph further down if you just scroll down a bit.
And so I think the analogy here could be, in the space of a very general set of knowledge, maybe you can say, okay, what's the difference between football and rugby, right? The ball's almost the same size, it's almost the same shape. But if you could talk to diehard fans of either sport, they're worlds apart, right?
Correct.
They have nothing to do with each other. But within the scope of general human knowledge, they're right next to each other.
Correct.
So if you're building a football and rugby discussion forum that's moderated by ChatGPT, how do you then have it be useful?
Yeah, sometimes it's not even even in the human world, those embeddings might actually, like if you presented those to a human, they would probably say that these are poles apart and not really relevant to each other. But for some reason, the embeddings, the default embeddings that come in for your custom piece of data might actually all look like this diagram over here, where everything overlaps with everything else, and there is very little separation or segmentation of those vectors. And that is a big problem. That basically means that you're looking for a certain kind of information, but then you get a whole bunch of other noise that comes in as context. And therefore, the quality of the results that you get out of the prompts that you send over to an LLM are quite terrible. Okay. Now, the way around it traditionally is that you take every piece of document that you have, you then run it through an LLM, spend tens of millions of tokens possibly trying to create summaries or digests of those, and then embed those with all those specific vectors and classifications and all of that done. It'll be insanely expensive and really, really slow. You will start hitting limits on those APIs very, very quickly. So if you want to build a production system, the conventional mechanism is an absolute showstopper because you just cannot proceed down that path. You'll spend an insane amount of time. So there's a really, really interesting method that OpenAI actually put out in a cookbook, which Build.ai went ahead and implemented, and it's actually fascinating. So I've only found 2 articles that talk about this. One is the OpenAI cookbook, and the second one is this particular article. I haven't found anything else in all my searches. But the solution really boils down to taking, generating what is called a bias matrix. And the bias matrix is actually created by creating a small set of, good answers and bad answers and creating that segment and creating a bias matrix. So once you've decided from a small sample set what looks good, what looks bad, and how they're different from each other, you can create a matrix that separates out these 2 segments. So if you get this big hodgepodge of things, it's almost like the Fourier transform of, vectors that normally seem all clustered together, but you can separate it out once you run it through the bias matrix.
So it's almost like how audio filtering works. Like talking about Fourier transforms, right? Where you want to, like with Adobe Audition or any of the other things, where you want to separate background noise from discussion noise. How is that going to work? Well, it does these transforms that emphasize the differences, even though in first pass they're in the same frequency range.
It just separates out all the different frequencies. The fast Fourier transform will do that and separate out all the frequencies and give you all of them separately. And this kind of does that. So the bias matrix is a very simple, matrix multiplication is a really simple concept, right? GPUs are amazing at it. It's very inexpensive and it can be embedded. So while you're doing the embeddings itself, you can actually go ahead and create the multiplication with the bias matrix and put it all in there. So it costs nothing more really than what you're already spending. You don't have to send every document to the LLM. You will not run out of rate limits, and the performance seems amazing. So this is a really neat technique to help you take your stuff to the next level if you're getting to production levels, or you have tons and tons of data that you have to process through and create RAG systems based on this. This is a really amazing technique to do that.
I think what this also emphasizes is unit costs, right? This is unit economics, right? Say if every click cost you a cent, and out of every 100 clicks you made $1, then okay, you're at break even.
Yes.
So you are not going to win by scaling. But if every click costs you 1 cent and out of every 100 clicks you made 50 cents, well, scaling will definitely not help you. I'm reminded of that episode of The Office where Michael started his own paper company. And he said, our prices are the only thing keeping us in business. And his accountant said, your prices are driving you out of business.
Your prices are too low.
What they realized
lowest in
they
town.
continued on this path. They were having incredible scale, but the unit economics might not make sense by the way that they were using LLMs. And so rather than, I guess, reading the narrative, they paused new signups for a while.
Correct.
It's clever of them. And then they went to figure out a solution to lower the unit costs, right? Because they can either raise prices or lower costs, kind of the two levers they had to pull. And they were able to lower the costs in order to be still standing.
Correct. So this is a fascinating methodology. Their accuracy actually jumped to about 90% compared to about 61% that they had earlier, which is really amazing. It's really impressive to get up to those levels of accuracy. So it's an amazing technique. It kind of just flies, under the radar. No, like I said, literally just 2 articles that I've come across to date about this particular topic. And so, one, thanks Utsav for bringing this up and pointing me in this direction. But for others as well, I thought this would be really beneficial. Go take a look at this. Go take a look at the cookbook that is published by OpenAI on this subject. There's a really easy notebook that you can go play around with and get started.
Yeah, we'll have the links in the video description for the cookbook, for this blog post. It's a really important thing to be able to focus on. We'll be able to figure out how to lower your costs without fundamentally changing, or actually in this case, improving. Right? You don't always have to take there's alternatives out there.
Correct.
And often the simplest way, you can refine it, you can get a lot more out of it than initially thought. That was really neat.
Agreed.
Actually, speaking about costs, I had a scare last night that I wanted to tell you about.
What was it?
Well, okay, so I've got 2 different AWS accounts, and one of them I use frequently. The steady state amount is in the in the low. It's usually about $200 a month.
Got it.
Occasionally, I've been doing a lot of experimenting with DocumentDB, and we'll save that for the next section of why that was more expensive than I thought. But anyway, so I set a billing alert at $200 per month. Now, this account, say it was registered with the email address A, but I also had another account associated with email address B, and that one is just some data in an S3 bucket in Glacier Instant Access. There's not much there. And I got an email to address A telling me that I had crossed the threshold, which caused me to panic because this account should have nothing. There's just no changes. There should be no changes. And I would have immediately logged in, but that's when I remembered that the MFA device that lets me into this account is under about 20 feet of water.
Were you hacked and not have access to your account?
No. Okay, so I don't have access to that account. I just lost my MFA device. So what you have to do when this happens is you have to send a signed, notarized affidavit of you are who you say you are. Oh, and also I had moved across countries in the meantime. So I had an email address, but not a phone number that worked. My old Australian number has been long since disabled. And so I only really had one factor, and the fact that I was still paying for it. So I have to fill out this form, photocopy my ID, get it notarized, and then they'll let me back into that account. So that'll be nice. I guess the point that I made is I set up a billing alert to come from, or to go to an email address that I thought was associated with one account, but it was also...
But it was the other?
It was the other. And so that's why I panicked. And a billing alert, I don't think it tells you what account it's about. So make sure to check this out and make sure when you set up a billing alert, to know what account it's relevant to. And also, don't lose your MFA device. You have to go through a lot of trouble to get it back, which I guess is the point, right? It should be a lot of trouble.
Yeah, but like phones also are some things that it's just going to get stolen at some point. You're going to lose it at some point. It's going to break at some point. And at some point, you want to upgrade your phone to a different phone. So in all of those scenarios, you got to find another way around retaining all of this.
Those all crossed my mind as the phone was sinking to the bottom. It was on that to-do list of, I need to set up a backup policy for my MFA device. Maybe this is the afternoon to do that. Check that off the list. So
and honestly, those 12 codes and stuff like that each one of those things gives you, it's completely impractical. You're never going to store it. Like, where do you store it? You store it and print it and store it somewhere. Like, that just doesn't make any sense. You don't want to store it online. You don't want to store it elsewhere because those are backup codes. So the best solution I've found so far is that I have this spare phone, an old one, that I use only as a backup to my authenticator. And every time I add a new, app to the authenticator, I go ahead and restore the backup, and it sits in a safe, mostly kind of battery shut. I'm pretty sure that someday it's going to come up and say, hey, I can't start up authenticator. You can't upgrade to the latest version of iOS. And so you're screwed. I am expecting that at some point, but till then, I'm going to kind of rely on that to work.
Well, so I'm using 1Password now, which I really like. And I'm able to, that when I do have the master key that's printed out and hidden in a safe place. And it's nice because, should anything happen to me, my loved ones have a way to get into my accounts. I like that. But it does kind of destroy the purpose of being a MFA. There's now a single factor, which is if you get into my laptop or any computer that I have that's running 1Password, you have access because you get the codes right there. So Correct. It is convenient, and I like that, but I am aware that it is no longer multi-factor. Well, I guess it's multi-factor, but it's one device.
Yeah, true.
I like having the YubiKeys in theory. Like, I like that idea, but in practice, it's just not practical.
Yeah, it isn't.
And I went with it for a while, and I have to go find my keys. And my keys are upstairs. I got to go log into this thing. And then if you lose the YubiKey, then you're in a lot of trouble. I think that makes a lot of sense for highly secure things, but maybe for personal use. Like, I tried, GPG signing an email with my YubiKey. That's I don't have important.
Honestly, I think the best solution I've found so far is either having a Face ID based MFA. So your Face ID becomes your token, or in the worst case scenario, an OTP. It's way more convenient than any of the authenticator apps I've come across, or any other system that I've seen.
Yeah, there's a name for that whole framework. What was that called? I was trying to remember what it was. Face ID. I had it written down. Oh yeah, Touch ID, Face ID. That's all in the framework of, what do they call it? Passkeys.
Passkeys. Correct.
Yeah. So I agree with you. That's something that you really can't fake.
Yeah. Correct. I mean, so far we will see.
I know people used to try to see if a picture of someone that's printed and held up against someone's face as a mask would work. And I think that might have in the early iterations, but not now. Well, I'm so surprised that it works, whether I have these bulky headphones on or not, whether I have a beard or not, the light conditions, it works really well. It is impressive. The robustness to different conditions that Face ID has.
I agree. No, it's definitely really good and works well so far. So it's one of my favorite approaches to doing security here.
Agreed. Well, and actually, this story brought up another issue that I wanted to talk with you about. Was to DocumentDB. Now, I didn't realize this, but if you go into the console and you stop a DocumentDB cluster, it will restart itself after 7 days.
That's strange. I've never heard of something like this.
Yeah, it's I'm not sure why it does that. We need to investigate it more. So what I was doing was, I put away that project for a little while, but I didn't want to completely destroy the cluster. And so I would
That is
stop
strange.
it. But then every once in a while, I would be like, oh, yeah, I need to, it's running again.
Is there a cloud trail log of what instantiates its return? Or I'm thinking about it like
No, it just warns you when you do it through the I was only working on it in the console, and I was just surprised. I'm trying to find an article about it, but
I have never heard of a resurrecting resource on it.
Okay, so this is interesting. So I'm seeing it on AWS repost. Let's see. To stop your instance. Interesting. Here, let me share this on the screen, and I'll see what you think about this one. So this is RDS apparently may do this as well. Let me put this on the screen.
RDS might come back up.
Here we go. So I want to use a Lambda function to stop an RDS service for longer than the 7-day duration. So by default, you can stop an RDS database instance for up to 7 days at a time. After 7 days, the instance restarts so it doesn't miss any maintenance updates. To stop your instance for more than 7 days, you can use step functions to automate the workflow without missing a maintenance window. So DocumentDB, I think, is following the same thing, where it starts itself back up, ideally, so it can get patched. So that way you don't... I guess that makes sense in that you don't want to all of a sudden restart your instance that's been stopped for 6 months and is vulnerable to 0-day exploits.
Yeah.
Although both RDS and DocumentDB should be behind VPCs anyway.
Correct. That's absolutely right. But you might have vulnerabilities in other instances. So, I mean, it's always better to have everything patched down.
Yeah, so good to know. If you stop your instance and you think, okay, this is done, set a reminder for yourself, or like this one says, use a step function that basically stops it again.
I mean, all the more reason why you need a tool like Cloudfix, because you need to monitor and manage this in a non-stop way. You have to be looking at it all the time and constantly, like garbage collection, constantly sweeping it away and cleaning it up. So, there's just one more reason, and I wasn't aware of this, but one more reason why that non-stop approach just makes so much sense.
Yeah, you need that continuous pressure, the continuous monitoring, because even if you think you have it right, it's going to come right back up and start billing you again. So yeah, be aware of that. Just use Cloudfix and we'll take care of it.
Correct. It helps you play the whack-a-mole, or the game of whack-a-mole with your resources that keep popping.
And now IP addresses too. But we've had our Elastic IP address finder fixer out for a long time.
Correct.
I was talking to Steph Gooch, and she asked me on her stream, it was, what is a surprise one? And I said Elastic IP addresses. It's bigger than people think.
Correct. And so the last audit we did, we have over 2,000 public IP addresses that run across our different services and systems. When you add that all up, it adds up to almost 9 or 10 grand a month. And, over the year, that'll add up to over 100K. So it's not a small amount of money even though each IP only costs about, $4, it all adds up very quickly.
When I was cleaning up this account last night, it is amazing. And again, why you want to use Cloudfix. Sometimes you have to delete one thing, but then you have to delete something that depends on it. And 4 things depend on that. And then so on and so on and so on. And it's actually somewhat hard to delete things. I think for like SageMaker Canvas, you have to delete the experiment, but then there's the experiment trial, but then there's like the experiment trial data set. And you have to delete things like 4 or 5 levels deep to actually delete the thing.
Correct.
It's automation.
This is a classic situation where if you have a CloudFormation template and something goes wrong, and the more complicated your CloudFormation template, if a resource fails in the middle, the nightmare that you generally go through as an exercise to kill everything else in a certain order so that your stack can be torn down. This is pretty much the same story across different services. Some of these things are painful. For sure.
All right. Well, it looks like we've hit the end of the hour. What's your week looking like?
I am continuing down the path of building a new AI tool every week. This week is actually dedicated to patents week, so I have a lot of disclosures that I have to get through. So I'm going to be working on some of that stuff. But yeah, it's fun. It's really fun. I can't wait to speak with Brian shortly and with Taranjeet. Those two promise to be exciting. I have so many questions to ask Taranjeet as I've been playing around with Embed Chain. This is going to be a fun conversation. So tune in on Friday as we talk to him. You don't want to miss this one.
Yeah, definitely. Well, obviously, I did some Common Lisp streams with Darko, and to summarize that one, you really need good libraries. And even though I love the language, without a good library, we spent a long time just figuring out how to sign an AWS in the AWS SIG v4 properly, and using something like Rust or Python, where those libraries have been tried and tested
correct
millions of times a second. Yeah, that's much easier. So at Darko's encouragement, I'm going to be learning Rust as my new strongly typed language. So I'm excited about that one.
I have one other thing, which is actually a very interesting development on the 3D printing stuff. So I ordered the MK4 upgrade kit from the MK3S. And unfortunately, I have what is called a bare upgrade for my MK3S. And there is no easy way to upgrade that to the MK4. So we have an amazing user group for 3D printing in India. It's a WhatsApp group with, I don't know how many people, maybe a few hundred. And I basically posted over there saying, I don't know what to do. I have this big upgrade kit that I bought, a few weeks ago, and it's just lying in a carton. I'd like to do something about it. And I don't want to tear down my MK3S in the hope that it'll work. So one of the distributors over here was gracious enough to say, hey, we'll just supply you with a new chassis and the rods and whatever else you need so that you don't have to tear down your existing 3D printer. We'll just ship it to you. You try it, you document it, and if it works, then we can share that with everyone else. So I am really excited about doing this experiment and hoping that I can upgrade an MK3S to a 4 on a bare upgrade model.
Well, we need to do another creator stream.
Yes.
When we do that. That'll be fun.
That sounds fun. Okay.
All right, everyone. Well, have a really nice week, and we will see you again on Friday.
Thank you. See you all. Bye.